Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mysterious Galaxy virtual event. I am Nick, the Director of Events and Digital Marketer for Mysterious Galaxy. Tonight, we are celebrating the release of A Lullaby for Witches. For that, we have with us authors Hester Fox, who wrote the book, and in conversation, Rachel McMillan of the book A Lullaby for Witches. It has been called magical, atmospheric, and heartbreaking. Excellent. What we all should read. Hester is a full-time writer and mother with a background in museum work and historical archaeology. And Rachel writes across myriad genres like historical mysteries and romance, a keen history enthusiast, and a lifelong bibliophile. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Hester and Rachel.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. For everyone who's watching, if you haven't already, you can actually hit the link below. You'll notice a link that says buy books and get signed personalized book plates because Hester is being wonderful and supplying signed book plates and personalization if you want for any purchases of A Lullaby for Witches. If you have any questions you want to ask the authors when it comes time for the Ask a Question section, hit another link below. In fact, below that one that says ask a question, just submit yours. I am going to now disappear and let these two lovely individuals discuss. So I will see you all later.
Thank you. Hi, Hester.
Hi.
I'm really excited to see you virtually. Congratulations on Lullaby for Witches. I've got the uncorrected proof here, but the cover looks the same.
Yeah.
I see this book absolutely everywhere. It's an absolutely gorgeous book, and I'm really excited that it's been getting such wonderful buzz. How has release week been feeling for you? I mean, there's a lot going on in your life right now, but how does it feel to have a new book out in the world?
It feels good. It feels like it's been a long time coming. Like you said, in the pandemic and kind of with virtual events, it feels kind of surreal because one day it's not out, the next it is, and here we are. I have a new baby at home, so it's
the last time we talked, the baby wasn't here yet, so now it has arrived.
Yeah, so it's been busy. So it kind of feels like having two new babies out in the world. One's a book and one's a little baby boy.
Aww. That's so great. I have a little nephew that was born last Sunday. So I was actually thinking about you because I was like, oh my gosh, Hester's baby is probably the same month as my little nephew. So I was just going to ask you a few questions. And then later on, as was mentioned, I can definitely read some questions from some viewers. I'm sure Hester would be happy to answer any of them. I also want to tell you, everybody, that you should go and stalk Hester online because her Instagram is gorgeous. She's active when she can be in communicating with readers. In fact, I am a Hester Fox fan, and it was my fangirling that connected us. And so I was really quite honored to be asked to interview you tonight. So I will just throw out some questions here. First off, I would like to talk about the significance of the title. Now, authors often know that sometimes the title we have in our head when we're writing doesn't necessarily end up as the title that's on the book. Has it always been A Lullaby for Witches?
So it has been. It's been one of those like kind of lucky strokes of fortune where it popped into my head one day. And, I did the first thing any author does is I go to Amazon and type it in and make sure the first
not 5 others.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And it just, and my editor liked it and the publisher liked it. So I kind of got lucky with that. Because definitely it's not always the case. A lot of times I'll have like a list and I'm, putting words down and brainstorming and trying different things. But this kind of just was kismet. It just kind of like came to me and it's worked really well and I like it.
It's very musical, and I like that it kind of hints at the resonance that converges these two time periods together, because we are in a dual time narrative, which you do so well. So I'm seeing people are really in the comments. There's a bit of streaming problems, but hopefully people can refresh, and that always happens. So what comes first for you? Plot, setting, or character?
Definitely setting. All of my books are set in New England, and they're for the most part, and yeah, all based on real places that I kind of like fictionalize with their names and some details, but they're all places that I've been and that I love, and that I want to set a story there. So then from there, once I have the setting, I kind of imagine the people that would have been moving around that place, and the plot comes after that. I'd say probably last, as the characters make themselves known and they kind of drive the plot.
Which is my favorite way of reading and writing any character-driven piece. And one of the things that I love about you, and that I noticed from stalking you on the internet, as all readers should do, is that you often, when you're writing, have visual art from the time period. So not just pictures of the houses, which you do have, and the time period, but also the actual visual art, which I find so remarkable, especially considering your background. So I did want to talk about how you definitely have museum background. You've got this background in historical archaeology, and it, I know, helps you excavate the past, because that seamless research is something that people keep mentioning. How do you make sure that you're balancing the burden of being authentic to your historical time period while still allowing for creativity to happen?
Yeah, I think a lot of the authenticity is in the details. So like small details really make a place and setting come alive in a time period. And so in a book like this, where there's that magical element that we're going to have to suspend, disbelief for, it kind of feels grounded in a real world, because it's real history. So like you were mentioning, like the art that I post on Instagram, I like to use, listen to music from the time period and look at art from the time period. And again, like my museum background, like working in houses from this era, the furniture that would have been in the houses, all that kind of thing, like makes a very realistic setting and kind of allows you to play around with the plot in that, like, the supernatural elements. So it makes it more believable when you do introduce those.
You rooted in, and you have the historical period.
Exactly.
And do you find that the research for each book is a little bit like a dig? Does your research background inform how you approach your research for your fiction?
Yeah, I think a lot of my research has been like through osmosis, just like from, my background in museum work, research I've done for school, reading. So a lot of it's kind of like in my head already. And then, when it comes down to get into details or like specific things, then I'm kind of, I think, like pretty much every other writer where, hitting Wikipedia, hitting the library and pulling books out. And
do you fall down rabbit trails when you're, have you ever spun out of, you're going to look up something because it's specific to the plot, and then 3 hours later, you're somewhere completely different in the vortex of history?
Oh gosh, for sure. Yeah. And I have so many bookmarks and tabs on my computer, and I think like, okay, well, this will have to be for a future project. I don't even know what I have saved at this point, but yeah, there's so many interesting things or things that, you end up using in the book and then getting cut during editing, that, you spent hours researching for a little sentence that gets cut. But yeah, for sure. Like none of it's wasted. Like I've definitely, gone back and used research from previous books that fit in for this one, or save things for other, or, kind of leads to like brainstorming sessions or new ideas. So I love researching, and I love that stage, because you do have that license to kind of like daydream and just, spend time, on these awesome historical sources. And we're like going to places. I love doing like site visits and things like that too, in the name of research. Like, especially for this book, when I do have a contemporary timeline, going to the town that it's based on, and well, I guess I'll get lunch here, and kind of see what the restaurant scene is like in the name of research.
Write that off as like, okay, this was for research purposes. I actually love that about you, because you do love to walk in, you love old houses, you love buildings. Harlow House plays a major part in this. When you are exploring a new town or place, or perhaps revisiting somewhere in Massachusetts you've always loved, what is it about stumbling upon a building that speaks to you? Is it this affinity you have, or is it your background that allows you to see, oh, this has, let's be cliche here, 7 gables. We're in Salem with 7 gables. Amazing. What draws you to a place, and how does it whisper its secrets to you?
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I think it definitely is kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but an atmosphere, kind of like ephemeral feeling. Like it's not, I'm not looking, at like architectural features that, I mean, I am, but I'm not basing anything on that. It's more like that visceral feeling you get kind of when faced with a place that holds a lot of history. For my first book, it was a house that I was doing my internship at, and I went there as on a site visit, and it was just like, oh my gosh, it just like hit me as soon as I walked in. There's just like so much history and atmosphere here, and like I want to set a story here. And for Harlow House, it's a house in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and I kind of, this is where I took a lot of artistic license. The exterior is in Gloucester, and then I kind of used different interiors from other houses to kind of like build my own house. But it was this house that's kind of like sitting up a little bit over the main street on a hill, and it was just like, there's just something about it that's, spoke to me. And it's, it's not I think a house where you would like look at it and be like, oh my gosh, it's like an architectural, it's like amazing, and it's anything like really special. It just has that kind of like certain something to it, that presence that really like begs to have a story told about it.
And that's why I love New England, and I love Massachusetts. I'm a Canadian, and my favorite place to go in the States when I visit is Boston and area. I love Gloucester. Actually, I would ask this to anybody in the comments, if anybody else just a huge New England fan or from there. And it's interesting because there's so many other stories that weave the supernatural, the paranormal with New England's very rich history. I'm thinking of Alice Hoffman and Practical Magic. Clearly the Salem witch trials. Do you feel that there's something that connects the area to a supernatural presence or this amazing kind of whisper of history? Can you talk to why that part of the country meshes so well with paranormal?
Yeah. And I really don't know, like I recently moved to Virginia, and
yes,
and I love it here. It's beautiful. And I live in an old farmhouse in a rural area, and it's just gorgeous. And there's lots of history here. I don't know if it's because I'm from New England, so there's something in my blood there, but I just don't feel that same kind of sense of like magic the way I feel in New England. And like you said, there's such a rich history there. The Salem witch trials. It's a very old city. I think a lot of people do like it when they visit Boston, because it does have that European feel to it. The architecture and the layout, and kind of like the higgledy-piggledy streets and buildings. So I really don't know. There is something about it. The old graveyards, the witch history. There's a rich literary history there. And again, like I always feel like I'm like, is it just me? Is it because I'm biased? Because I'm from there and I love it. But I do think there is something special there.
You go to Concord and it has the best local authors section I think I've ever seen in the world. Like you go into a bookstore and it's like local authors. Everybody's from around here.
I love it, yeah, because they have everybody from like the 19th century, and you're like, oh yeah, of course they were local.
The entire American literary syllabus is right here. And you did mention earlier that you go and you think you're always thinking about the contemporary time frame. I did want to ask you how you ensured that Augusta and Margaret were both getting the same amount of page time. For people who haven't read the book yet, it is a story about 2 women whose histories converge over time, and how women's voices and strength are not necessarily indigenous to one time period. So as a dual time writer, you have a very tricky job to make sure it's not like the Margaret show, and that the 2 timelines actually do make sense, and it's not just 2 separate stories. So is it Post-it notes? Is it Bristol board? How do you make sure they get enough page time?
I think it's just the story, kind of like organically for them. The story I wanted to tell, it just kind of had to be that way. And I do start out with a loose timeline, a loose outline, but I don't think originally I realized how closely their stories would converge the way that they do. So I think it very easily could have been a past timeline and a present timeline. And probably I would have been like, with my Post-it notes being like, okay, this chapter, Margaret, Augusta. But it was so important when I started writing it, it became clear that like, okay, these are going to converge and their stories are going to come together in a certain way, that just to tell that story, I didn't really need to worry about, who was having more time, because it just organically, to tell the story, it had to come out the way that it did.
They had to share it. And I love all of your heroines. For people who are new and just checking out Hester, I mean, Witch of Willow Hall was the first one, I believe. Widow of Pale Harbor, which has this amazing kind of Beauty and the Beast trope, which I love. And then, wait, why am I blanking on this?
It's okay. It's
what is it? Orphan of Cemetery Hill. Yes, which is so Wuthering Heights. And, definitely you have your own spin on this, but you are definitely pulling on Gothic tropes. And I had the opportunity to sit on a virtual with Chris Walder and Paulette Kennedy just before Christmas, and I was asking them, why do you feel that Gothic stories and even Gothic romance are still such a huge part of what we're reading and engaging in today? Even if you go to TikTok or Bookstagram, there's all of these gorgeous Gothic aesthetics. There's all these books. What is it about this genre that suits readers of both genders, but especially women readers nowadays?
I think a lot of it is just good old-fashioned escapism. Like, it's so romantic. All the tropes of the Gothic genre, like, you can be a strong heroine, but you also get to be as feminine as you want, or not. And again, like, even for somebody that doesn't feel like I feel like I'm not as strong, or I'm not like an extrovert. I'm not like somebody that would, like, if I was in a haunted house, I'd be scared witless, like that. But there's like a kind of like bravery in the heroines, where even if they don't think of themselves maybe as inherently brave, which is a lot of my heroines, they start out maybe unsure of themselves or lacking confidence, or not thinking of themselves as like an outspoken, strong woman. Facing these obstacles, like kind of being in a terrifying house or a terrifying situation, and kind of coming into their power by facing it. And I think that's very empowering for readers. It's a way to live vicariously, and it's kind of, a way to find our own power. So I think that's definitely part of it. And again, just like, it is just so fun. I think there's been like a resurgence of like, Gothic things in general, like Halloween. I think everybody kind of, especially the last 2 years that have been so hard for everybody. And again, like, I'm from New England, so I'm biased, but I love the fall because it's cozy season. You start wearing your sweaters, you start drinking your pumpkin spice lattes, you have your fuzzy socks, and you're cozied up by the fire reading books, and it's just like a very safe feeling, kind of. And then to have that be coinciding with Halloween and kind of spooky things, and being safe inside and reading a scary story. I think there's just something so comforting about that, especially for a lot of us, if that was our childhood, like reading scary stories. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it's comfort and escapism. It's just kind of like having a renaissance right now, kind of, I don't know, thanks to the pandemic. But
I love it. And you and I both come from places that have very colorful falls. So the colorful aspect kind of contrasts the darker days and the gray. And I love how you were talking about how the pandemic has kind of influenced our reading habits. But one of the things that I've noticed about your heroines is, yes, they grow into their power, which you said so amazingly, but they're also curious to begin with. And I think that curiosity and that ability to step into the unknown is especially pertinent right now, because for the past 2 years, no one knew what was going on anywhere collectively. It was a very uncertain time. And in your books, we always have that sense of unsettling, like, where is she going? How is she creating this world? And yet your books are historical, romantic. There's a bit of everything for everyone. There's definitely a feminist slant to them, which I love. How do you know when to draw the reader back so we don't fall into hocus pocus? I'm thinking of the movie with the witches. Like, how do you just keep enough of that's a skill you've had since the beginning? Is it in outlining? Is it in the way that you're sensing what's happening around you? There's always just something beyond the veil in your books.
Yeah, I mean, I for the most part, I write what I want to read, and that's like a very certain set of things where it's like I want a romance, you know, a story, a love story, and that means a happy ending. So even if there are, you know, scary things or unknown things, you know, we know we're going to get that kind of satisfying, at least a happy ending with the love story. I want, you know, I love magic. I love kind of like subtle magic, everyday magic, like herbal work and, you know, spells, kind of like women's, like traditionally, you know, things that are subversive to the patriarchy. So like, you know, women practicing herbal remedies. So yeah, so basically, yeah, just like writing what I want to read, and you know, I am kind of a scaredy cat myself. Like when I was younger, I could read anything. I read so much Stephen King and horror novels, and I feel like as I've gotten older, I've kind of like gotten away from that a little bit. So nothing, you know, I'm writing it's not going to be too scary, I hope, for anybody, but it'll, you know, kind of hopefully be spooky. And, you know.
And that's what I love about it, that Gothic kind of Brontean thing. And one of and I don't remember exactly, but we chatted in the fall around Halloween time, months out from this book. And one of the things that came up was my asking you about how we have evolved as women since Margaret's time and Harlow House in Lullaby for Witches. And you were saying something very interesting about how you had discovered and you learned from your reading that women had far more agency than we sometimes think in hindsight. Do you remember that? It was a while ago, so I don't want to put you on the spot.
Bringing it back to me now. I'm like, yeah, I think probably we were talking about how, you know, there's maybe like this presentism almost, where it's like the present is kind of like the most, you know, progressive or forward thinking. And I think we said a lot, like I also like the Middle Ages, and I read like a lot of historical fiction set in medieval times. And, you know, that's almost synonymous with like, you know, the Dark Ages, and like everything was backwards then, and it was like so dark and terrible. But really like the Middle Ages were like this beautiful Renaissance, and there was like a lot of learning, and you know, there was much more equality between the sexes than what we think of. And that's definitely true for, you know, this era too, which I was writing in the 1870s, where I think we think of like corsets, and we think of, you know, like women being not able, and again, like obviously it was not, there's never been a great time to be a woman. Like,
no, ever.
And we're seeing that today. And I mean, it's horrible. But, like, you can't say that it was like a line from A to B that things have just gotten progressively better. I mean, there's always been good and bad. And definitely women were, you know, a lot more involved, I think, in things than we think, or maybe at least from my upbringing and my education that I realized. Like one of the characters in Margaret's storyline is a woman named Phoebe, and she's a Black woman, and she lives in Tynemouth, based on Gloucester. And she was based on research that I did that women were actually, you know, they were involved in the fishing industries there. Like it wasn't, we think of maybe fishermen just going out on boats, but women were absolutely involved. And she, you know, she mends fishing nets and weaves fishing nets and sinkers and things like that. So that was like an interesting tidbit of information to find while researching. And again, just goes to show, like, again, like maybe other people realize that more than I did, but I think we have some inherent biases about the past and kind of like what women were up to and what they weren't up to. And I think, you know, the history books, you know, if history is written by the victors and a lot of times, you know, men, we definitely see things through that patriarchal slant, which is one of the reasons I've always loved historical archaeology and our material culture in museum houses, for example, because we're working with the historical record of objects and not the written word. So we're seeing the objects that women used. We're seeing, you know, kitchen things and domestic objects, and art and everything. And again, that's like a way of women's voices being in the historical record that we would miss otherwise just from the written record.
Because often women were silenced, given, as you say, the patriarchal slant to history. And what I found so interesting about that anecdote about the woman Phoebe in Lullaby for Witches is that it broadens what we are pursuing, hopefully now in fiction, whereas before people would say, no, you can't have this character. There's no way there would be a Black woman working in Tynemouth. But history continues to prove us wrong. And I really love that it allows us to think about stories beyond the boundaries we might have set, given that, as you say, there's the objects, there's the concrete evidence. So this wasn't in my questions, but you're so smart. I'm wondering if I could ask you, how do you loved the tangible, tactile work with archaeology and objects. How do you transpose that to writing? Because you are a beautiful writer. You really are. Everybody should know. How does that look for you?
That looks a lot like just inspiration, I think, in general, like just being inspired by the objects and the stories they tell, like, because they're almost like the skeleton, like what's left, you know, when like a life decays, you have like the skeleton, and like the objects are what's left, and they tell a story, and it's up to you to imagine, you know, who owned them, who moved around them, what they meant to somebody's life. So, you know, in historical archaeology, or really any kind of like academic field, you're kind of bound by, you know, academic standards and research, and with good reason. But as a writer, you can kind of use your imagination and be like, I wonder, you know, who owned this and why, and kind of make up your own stories, which is really awesome. Which is what I always wanted to do when I was working with objects. Like, you know, I wished you could have like a time machine or a crystal ball and go back and see like who was holding them. And that's kind of like, this book is a little bit of that wish fulfillment where like Augusta, my modern day character, is working in a museum, and she kind of gets that experience.
You get to kind of write through what you lived working in that. And I really love, obviously you've had a major move and you don't necessarily have the same muse or inspiration around you. Is there, and I know that in the future, I don't know how much you can say about it, you are going somewhere completely different in your fiction, geographically. I mean, we'll still have the romance and the mystery and the magic, but what was it like to write that first manuscript that is set outside of New England?
It's kind of exciting. I mean, it is exciting. It's like a whole new, I'm like, I have to get new research books. Oh no, like that's terrible. So all new research books, and you know, scores and kind of like all that fun stuff in the pre-writing stage. It's so fun. And then and I will say I've said in England and Yorkshire, which is somewhere I have been several times. So I get to, you know, kind of relive my visits through there and go through my photos. And yeah, and I know you're a traveler, so you totally get that yourself.
And there's a bookish aspect, which I think is wonderful, because again, I think people are really craving stories about books right now, especially in tumultuous times. How did books form our perspective, our hindsight? How did books build community? Is it fun for a writer to be writing a bookish book?
It's fun. I also feel like there's like a weight of responsibility, because I'm, you know, you're writing not just for readers, but for like really bookish readers, like librarians and booksellers and like my favorite people like that. And so there's like this responsibility to really like reverently treat like the subject matter. So yeah, it is fun though. Like I love the research. I don't want to give too much away about where it's, or what it's set, but yeah, but it has been really fun to like do this research and kind of indulge my bookish side for that.
Love it. Just going through and making sure I didn't miss anything. Everybody, yes, definitely read. Hester also writes heroes that I love, and I'm a huge romantic, so check all of them out because I just love them. And I just love the vibes you have, you know, the Beauty and the Beast trope, the Jane Eyre. I use Bronte a lot, but it's just because that kind of is where so much of our Gothic understanding lies. And it's a great bridge to contemporary writers who are writing Gothic stories. So I guess my final question before I take some from the side here would be, who are some of your contemporary Gothic go-to writers? Or is there anything that you've read and loved recently that we should know about?
Yeah, so I'll start off with, you mentioned two of my favorite authors already.
I figured they'd come up.
I know Nick said he was going to pop like some of the names of the books into the chat. So Chris Walder, she wrote The Lost History of Dreams, which is amazing. It deals with like a post-mortem photographer, which, you know, how cool is that in the Victorian age? And I'm reading her next book right now.
Unnatural Creatures?
Yes, which
so
is like
good. That's a pre-order.
That's a pre-order. You should definitely pre-order that. So she's just amazing. Like if you really like feeling like you're reading a Victorian novel, she really nails that perfectly. Paulette Kennedy's new book, or her debut book, Parting the Veil, is chock full of Gothic goodness. And I think, I want to say that's Yorkshire also, but I can't remember exactly, but it's definitely England. It's Yorkshire?
It is. And her next deal announcement was just announced. This is why Twitter is my best friend, because I know all the books that are coming out. And she's setting it in New Orleans, which I just think is going to be amazing.
Because there is some, she has some.
She's got the Cajun culture. And
so definitely check that out. Sarah Waters is a big one. I love her books. They're just like so like decadent, and I love just like burying myself in one of hers. Like The Little Stranger probably is my favorite of hers.
So many twists in that too. It's like amazing.
It's so creepy. Like for somebody that's like doesn't like to be scared, I can't believe it. It's just such a slow kind of like spooky burn scare. So definitely recommend that one. And then a new to me author, a book that I read a few months ago, Jess Kidd, who wrote Things in Jars. And
I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, that was so good. That's just what a like distinctive voice she has. And that again is like, it's been again a few months since I read it, but like it's Victorian England, and again like anatomist and like, you know, collectors collecting, you know, human specimens and things like pickled in jars, and just like there's like ghosts, and it's funny too, and it's just like a really fun book. But lots of Gothic tropes in there. I mean, so many. I think those are the ones like right off the top of my head. If I can just say contemporary romance I just read that I loved. It's not necessarily Gothic, but it's witchy. Is the X-Hex.
That one was so cute. I loved that.
Yeah, so if you love like funny romance and cute, and it was like sweet and fun and with witches, like Erin Sterling is the author in that one. So that was definitely a recommended read.
Hester's very good at sharing what she's reading on social media. So I will give a shout out to that as well. Another reason to follow Hester on social media. Okay, I'm going to click the ask the question box here, and Hester's got her cool mug there. What was it that inspired you to jump from historian, archaeologist to author, asks Kelsey.
So a lot of it was job market. So I was, so it's an awesome field to be in. It's also a very difficult field to be in, especially for full-time work. So I was working seasonally technically as a park ranger at a historic site in Massachusetts, which was awesome. I love the historical house, but again, just not really a sustainable career. And I started writing around that time, and I was writing on my iPad while I commuted to my job. And then shortly after that, I signed my book or signed with my agent and a publishing deal, and then started having babies. So it just kind of became like a natural progression. I loved spending my 20s like doing digging and working in museums, but it is a very difficult field to be employed in.
Yeah. And now you get to like exercise your passion for it.
And I get to write about history, so it's worked out well.
And share it with us. And I do want to, just before I go to the next question, I want to make sure that I'm getting these little compliments for you. People would love to experience that hashtag hot California summer. So I guess sometimes winter and fall can be a little bit of envy for people. Not today in our blizzard in Toronto. I love a Beauty and the Beast trope. Me too. Love good Gothic aesthetic TikToks. Yes. And as a fellow historian, your background speaks to Kelsey. The open tab struggle is real. Yes, it is. And people have always wanted to visit Massachusetts and New England. So that's great. All right. So another question is, what is the most interesting piece of information you unearthed when researching this book? Show the cover.
Oh, that book. So something that I was kind of aware of, but I didn't really know the history of. Again, I said this fictional town is based on a North Shore town called Gloucester in Massachusetts, which is a beautiful place. And if you're looking to visit Massachusetts, highly recommend. So there is, outside of the main downtown, there's a nature reserve with hiking trails, and it's called Dogtown. And I was like, that's a weird name for an area, Dogtown. And like, people must take their dogs there, and they do. And it's like a hiking trail, and you can bring your dogs. But what I learned was, and this is common knowledge, it's not like I discovered anything here, just to be clear, is that it was a little settlement from like the very early days of like colonists coming. And it kind of, once it died out of its heyday, it kind of became this like little settlement of like outcasts or like misfits or people that maybe, you know, just didn't want to leave for whatever reason. But you had like free Black people living there. You had some indigenous people living there. You had women living there on their own. And, you know, old women by themselves, maybe rumored to be witches. I don't know. And I think it got the name Dogtown because there were a lot of stray dogs. But a really interesting book I read that was fiction, but based on all this history, is called The Last Days of Dogtown by Anita Diamant.
Oh, I've read her, but not that one.
Yeah, so she wrote like The Boston Girl and some other things. Yeah. So it was so interesting because she really did the research like on the specific people that lived there, and she really made it come alive. So we went hiking there, and it is we went in winter, so it was kind of spooky because there weren't a lot of other people around. It was dark, and there's these big boulders throughout the reserve. And I think during like I forget what it's called, like the WPA or whatever, in the 1930s, 1940s, like the work projects, they hired somebody, I guess, to decorate the boulders. So you'll come across these boulders in the middle of like kind of nowhere on the paths, and they just have like really bizarre sayings on them. And I should have looked at my pictures to remember some of them from what they said. But like, you know, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I don't know, something like that. But like kind of like more bizarre. And then sprinkled throughout the reserve are actually, you can still see the foundations of the houses from the 16 and 1700s. And that was inspiration for a part of, you know, the book where Margaret practices her witchcraft, is in the old town. So I thought that was really interesting, just like this like little history of this little kind of forgotten town that's now a nature park, but had like a really rich history, like a really diverse history that I would have known about.
No, and it feeds into that so well. And that's my favorite part of researching. And it kind of ushers into this question, which is, what time period / movement calls to you the most?
Mm-hmm. That's really tough. I think I like being an author because I get to explore different ones.
Yeah.
I think, so for my first book, Witch of Willow Hall, in the 1820s, like there's something about that, the immediate like pre-industrial time that really is so interesting to me. Like, you still got like that spookiness because it still feels so like old, but you're like verging on the modern, and you know, you have like the mill scene and stuff in New England. And I love old mills. I think they're so atmospheric. So I love like the 1820s, 1830s, like right on the kind of tail end, you're getting like the end of like those beautiful Regency fashions. I'm not sure if they call them Regency here, but I love like the fashion. I love kind of like the architecture. And again, I said, I love, you know, medieval Europe is really interesting to me. And I do bring that into my next book a little bit. Yeah. So I love these books where you can explore like kind of time periods from within different time periods. So my next one will be set in the 1920s, but with a kind of callback to a medieval time.
Oh,
period.
That's going to be fun. And what I love is you always, you always find the way to address women's power in each of the time period, and how it echoes across and how we learn from each other. From your talks, podcasts, and Instagram, Kathleen asks, it's clear that there is a warm, loving world of women sharing their witchy interests. Do you think that translates into your modern heroine having a safe place that was denied your historical heroine in ways? Oh, that's a very smart question.
It's too smart.
Do you need me to go back on anything? So
yeah, can you read it again?
Yeah. So it's clear that there's a warm, loving world of women in your books sharing witchy interests.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that shows your modern heroine had a safe place that perhaps your historical heroine was denied, given our understanding and our acceptance? I'm translating here, but giving our acceptance of quote unquote as witchy things. And do you feel that it's safer now, or do you find that it provides a contrast? I mean, obviously you were not a witch maybe in a past life, but you were not a witch in Margaret's time. How do you maybe delineate how far we've come?
Well, I think for my modern heroine, Augusta lives in Salem, Massachusetts, and so that's kind of like a callback to like kind of that history where she's surrounded by like the history of the witch trials and things. And I was talking with another author yesterday about this, where Salem has kind of become this like landmark for like witches and weird people. And I mean, and like the best way, like misfits, like a lot of people find comfort in Salem, Massachusetts now, whereas like the historical witch trials, we now know that most of those women probably weren't really witches or practicing witchcraft, but why do we as women or people that identify themselves as witches today are so drawn to Salem? It's kind of like this safe space. It's become like, and I'm speaking as somebody that's been there a lot. I mean, I'm not sure if other people here have been there, but it's like, Halloween is a big deal there. It's like Witch City, USA. Everything is witch themed and magic themed.
It's almost Disneyfied in ways, because there is that pop culture element. There is, I don't remember the actresses, but there is, the Bewitched statue. So that whole area where people can go and kind of be themselves and reclaim a place that had heretofore been known as a very repressive space.
Exactly. Right. So I think for Augusta to be living in that town and kind of like with that history, like it is a little bit of a subversion of that, where it's like now it's kind of like this safe space. And, historically it was not a safe space for women. I think, and it takes some of the shine off the romance that we view the past with sometimes, where like, I wish I was, living in the 1870s. I could wear these beautiful dresses and things like that. But again, not, viewing the past through rose-colored glasses.
And we do romanticize witches. I say this is the biggest Deborah Harkness fan in the history of time. I love the All Souls series so much. And of course, there's that whole history of witchcraft and a woman who's coming into her power. So it's neat that we embrace something that was seen as, oh, she's my favorite, in all caps. Yes, I found a kindred spirit. Were there any themes you wanted to include in the book from the start? I tend to think you have some overarching themes that just kind of carry through, but specifically to Lullaby for Witches.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are just like subconscious. Like I don't even realize I'm doing it until I'm reading the book. There's just, things that I love that are going to find their way in. I definitely knew I wanted, there's always going to be a love story, at least one love story in my book, a romance timeline. So I knew that going in. And the fun part about this book is I got to put two in. And as I was writing the book, one of them took a turn that I didn't actually know that there was going to, be in the book. So that was really fun. And again, we have like that historical timeline and the contemporary timeline. You have a little more wiggle, like a little freedom to kind of like play out the love stories in different ways. So they do play out, and it's kind of, I thought that was fun to explore. I knew that it was going to be, based in a historic house museum. That was kind of the basis for the book. And then, like, as we were speaking about at the beginning, like the setting, I really wanted to write somewhere in like a coastal Massachusetts town. So those were probably the big kind of tent posts of the book that I knew were going to be in there.
I love that. And finally, we have what have been some of your literary influences? You mentioned some books that you really like. Is there anybody that just always stands out?
Yeah. So as not a kid, but when I was younger, in school, I was really into like the Victorian authors, like Charles Dickens, and again, like you were mentioning, like what's called her Jane Eyre, like the Brontes. Edgar Allan Poe obviously was a big one. So I really didn't stray that far from like those 19th century authors, because kind of like, unfortunately, that's kind of like what we were taught in school. We didn't read a lot of, contemporary literature or branch out to different genres. So I didn't really realize there were like these other genres out there, but it meant that I did like really immerse myself in these Victorian authors. And I think that played a big part kind of on like my writing today and like the feeling I'm going for. But in terms of authors that I admire today, I mean, I did mention those books, historical romance, like I'd say I get a lot of inspiration and they've like made a big impact on me as an author. I love Julia Quinn and Tessa Dare and Elizabeth Hoyt and Alyssa Cole. Yeah. I love reading romance because I think they just do such a great job with like their character developments. And like, if you want to study character, like you can't do better than like go to a romance author because they just have them down like so well. And yeah,
and they're so subversive. I always tell people that if you really want to know some supercharged statements on the state of the world and what it's like to read women who have agency and assert their power, then definitely read romance. It's such a wonderful genre. I'm just going to shout out to any other last comments or questions for Hester, because I've got a little chat up here and I can see this. Look at the power I am wielding all the way from Canada. Anything else for Hester? Well, I'm sure that she will follow up if you have any comments for her on her social media page.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, you have mentioned Instagram. Where can they find you? Like, what do you have a special screen name? Is your name on Instagram?
Yeah, so Hester B. Fox on Instagram and Twitter. And that's where I'm the most active. Maybe not so much these days with the new baby, but definitely if you leave me a message, especially on Instagram, I will see it. And I try to reply to everybody. And I love meeting readers and other authors on there. So.
And then people can stalk you like Rachel did. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah. in a healthy, I love you.
In a healthy way. In a healthy way.
Healthy boundaries way.
Practice that.
Well, now I'm a Rachel fan too, so it worked out well.
Yes, and where can people follow you, Rachel?
I am always Rach K. Mick on social, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, RACHKMC. So find me because I try to share a lot of what I'm reading as well. I love sharing new books.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you so much, Hester. Congratulations on your book release. Yay.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yes. And don't forget, everyone, if you haven't yet already, why are you waiting so long? You can go ahead and purchase a copy of A Lullaby for Witches, buy books, and get signed or personalized book plates within reason. Don't put a whole paragraph. I don't think Hester wants to write a whole paragraph on a book plate. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and being part of this wonderful event. We hope you all can join us next time. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Kitty.